Hi, I'm Camilla, 30 years old, and I've been married to Patrick for 3 years. We don't have children yet. Our lives took a significant turn after the sudden passing of Patrick's father, Jesse. At the time, we were living in another state, and the news of Jesse's unexpected heart attack hit us hard. During the funeral, Patrick's uncle subtly suggested that as the youngest and only son, Patrick should return home to be closer to family and support his mother. A few months later, Patrick told me that he had arranged a job transfer to be closer to his family home. He made the decision on his own and only informed me afterward, which really upset me. A decision that should have involved both of us. When I confronted him, Patrick apologized, explaining that he had expected me to resist the idea. He knew that I didn't get along well with his mother, Mary, a feeling that was mutual. When we lived farther away, our visits to his parents were mostly limited to extended holidays, partly due to our work schedules. Mary often complained about how infrequent our visits were, comparing us to Patrick's sisters Amanda and Diane, who lived nearby and visited frequently. Patrick always defended our situation, but the tension between Mary and me was never far from the surface. One of Mary's main issues with me was our lack of children. During a summer visit, she once openly questioned why we didn't have any yet, going so far as to compare me unfavorably to her daughters, who also didn't have kids. Her outdated views and intrusive comments about motherhood always grated on me. Still, when Mary's health began to decline, even Patrick grew more concerned, which played a big role in our recent decision to move closer to her. With Patrick now back home and me having quit my job, I dreaded the increased interaction with Mary. I even considered letting Patrick move back on his own, especially after hearing a friend's horror story about her husband's infidelity during a business trip. But after much thought, I decided to move with him. After all, we wouldn't be living with his mother full-time. Surprisingly, Mary seemed genuinely pleased with my decision. 3 weeks later, Mary invited me over for tea, something I had never accepted before. Reluctantly, I agreed. When I arrived at my in-laws' house, Mary and Amanda were both there to greet me. Amanda wasted no time with her snark. "Pamela, it's been so long. Why haven't you visited since moving here?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Internally, I was already regretting coming. Mary, however, seemed oddly cheerful. "I was so happy when you decided to move closer," she said. "But it seems I was wrong. You don't like me, do you?" For a brief moment, I was tempted to confirm her suspicion just to see her reaction, but I held my tongue. "I don't dislike you, Mary," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I've just been feeling unwell, adjusting to the move. The new environment has been tiring," I explained, which was partly true. I'd been resting at home due to fatigue, and Patrick hadn't even mentioned this visit. Why was I here today, only to endure their harsh words? Mary quickly accused me of disliking her. But wasn't it the other way around? How were we supposed to get along under these conditions? Amanda cut in sharply. "How can you speak to your mother-in-law like that? Apologize to her. Say you're sorry." I braced myself for Mary's anger, but her response caught me off guard. "You're right," she said, her voice unexpectedly soft. "I have been mean. I'm sorry, Pamela. And I'm also sorry about the comments I made about children. I was being nosy." I was stunned. I had expected a lecture, perhaps some hidden sarcasm, but there was none. Even Amanda looked surprised. "All I ever wanted was to hold a grandchild," Mary confessed quietly. She went on to explain that Amanda's husband was infertile, and Diane seemed to be having fertility issues as well. So, she had placed her hopes on Patrick and me. Even though I knew about Amanda and Diane's struggles, Patrick and I had our own conversations about children. We were considering it, but it wasn't a decision to be rushed. "Please just give us some time," I replied, bowing my head slightly. Despite everything, I still felt a sense of duty. "I'm sorry," I added, "but do visit us sometime." With that, the tension seemed to dissolve. Mary and Amanda resumed watching TV, sipping their tea as if nothing had happened. "I like this announcer," Mary remarked about a local TV personality. "She's so energetic and bright." Watching them together, I felt a pang of regret. Maybe if I had been more outgoing, things could have been different with Mary and her family. It was a fleeting, somewhat naive thought, but I was relieved to have expressed my feelings earlier. Maybe this could lead to a better relationship between us, I hoped. But that hope didn't last long. Later that evening, Patrick came home, visibly upset. "Mom told me you said you have no intention of getting along," he said, his voice laced with anger. She was crying, Pamela. What did you say to her? I was taken aback. Just a few hours ago, he had left with a smile, and now he was accusing me of something completely different. Patrick, there's been a misunderstanding. I began, trying to stay calm. I told her it's difficult for me to be friends with her given how things have been between us, but I never said I didn't want to get along. He didn't seem convinced. His earlier smile now felt like a distant memory, replaced by doubt. I felt a wave of fear. He fully believed Mary's twisted version of the story. I tried to explain further, but he wasn't listening. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. After all the effort of moving here, weren't you prepared to make it work? If you're here with us, you need to be a bit more patient. Patrick glanced at me, his expression mirroring Amanda's words. I suddenly felt very alone. I moved here because I wanted to be with Patrick, not to appease Mary and Amanda. I looked him in the eye and said, "It's clear that Mary and the others might never approve of me. Maybe you should consider someone she likes more." The word divorce slipped out before I could stop it, and for the first time, Patrick looked genuinely alarmed. "Wait, hold on. How did we jump to divorce?" he asked, bewildered by the sudden turn. "I just want you to get along better with my family." He couldn't seem to grasp that his family might never truly accept me, which left me feeling equally baffled. But Patrick seemed determined to resolve the misunderstanding. The next day, he came home late from work and told me about his conversation with his mother. She had admitted that there was a misunderstanding and even apologized. "What a fuss," Patrick said, as if it were all behind us. Then, as if on a completely different note, he mentioned that Mary's birthday was coming up. "How about we celebrate her birthday at a fancy restaurant?" The sudden shift from turmoil to talks of a birthday celebration left me confused. But it was clear that Patrick was making an effort to mend things, even if the path forward seemed rocky. Patrick suggested that if we framed the birthday dinner as my idea, it might help shift Mary's perception of me in a positive direction. I was skeptical, given Mary's complex personality, but I agreed to make the reservation. I invited Amanda and the rest of the family, booking a table for 8. Patrick was on board, but as the day approached, an uneasy feeling grew inside me. Patrick had been distant lately, his responses to my attempts at conversation curt and indifferent. I felt more isolated with each passing day. The night of the dinner arrived, and we walked into the restaurant to find Mary, Amanda, and their spouses already seated. The host showed Patrick and me to our table, casting a curious glance in our direction, adding to my discomfort. "Happy birthday, Mary," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I greeted Mary cheerfully, trying to bridge the gap. However, she didn't even acknowledge me, instead turning to the others and thanking them for joining her celebration. It felt like a deliberate snub. Amanda glanced at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I thought today was a family gathering," she remarked, her brief, puzzled look leaving me uneasy. Diane, sensing the tension, glanced over with concern, making it clear that I was being deliberately excluded. Determined not to let it ruin my evening, I decided to quietly keep to myself and leave early. But just as I settled on this plan, a staff member approached our table with a slightly awkward expression. "I'm sorry, but the reservation was actually made for 7 people tonight," he informed us. Confused, I responded, "I distinctly remember reserving for 8. Could there be a mistake?" "No, it was definitely changed to 7, the staff member replied, recalling my original reservation. "But about a week ago, we received a call from a gentleman asking to reduce the number." Stunned, I turned to Patrick for an explanation. His response floored me. "Yes, service for 7 is fine. Everyone's here now," he stated plainly, confirming that he had made the change himself. In that moment, I felt a wave of betrayal and disbelief. Patrick's actions made it clear that despite his claims of wanting to smooth things over, his commitment was superficial at best. The realization that he had manipulated the situation without telling me cast a dark shadow over what was supposed to be a festive family gathering. I stood there, stunned. Patrick turned to me with a glare, and I braced myself. "I heard from Mom that you've been undermining our family, saying I don't earn enough, and that I'm insensitive. You had a lot to say, huh?" It turned out that a week ago, when Patrick contacted Mary about the dinner reservation, she had filled his ears with all sorts of falsehoods. Blinded by anger and believing her without question, he had called the restaurant, pretending to be me, and reduced the reservation from 8 to 7. Since the staff recognized the family name, they didn't question the change. I couldn't believe how easily Patrick had been misled. The realization hit hard. His loyalty had wavered, and it seemed like I was the only one trying to salvage something real in this tangled web of family drama. I questioned my presence there as frustration boiled over. When I confronted Patrick, demanding that he apologize to everyone and reflect on his actions, he did something unexpected. He insisted that I should apologize to my in-laws and go home alone to think things over. Naturally, I refused. I couldn't apologize for things I hadn't said, nor did I need a husband who took his mother's word over mine. Tears of frustration welled up in my eyes. Why had I even followed him here? Seeing my distress, Patrick began to panic, but it was too late. Mary, observing the scene, wore a smug smile, clearly pleased with the chaos she had stirred. I spoke coldly to Patrick. Next time, marry a younger, more docile daughter-in-law. Maybe then you'll have the children and happiness you want. Mary's response came sharp and cutting. Pamela, why don't you go back to your parents' house? A daughter-in-law is ultimately an outsider. I can't see you as part of this family. You're not charming at all, so please leave, quickly. Her words stung, but they also solidified my resolve. I didn't need to be told twice. I'm leaving, with or without your approval. Good luck finding someone who can actually get along with someone as twisted as you, I retorted, turning on my heel to walk out of the restaurant. Patrick stayed silent, his head buried in his hands. As I neared the exit, I heard someone calling my name. It was Diane and her husband. Pamela, wait, Diane called out, her voice strained with distress. I can't stand it anymore. Mom and Amanda, they haven't changed at all. I knew the gossip about you was false. Her words, a rare acknowledgement of truth amidst all the chaos, gave me a flicker of solace. Diane continued, making it clear that she was ready to cut ties with the toxic environment. It was a small gesture of solidarity, but in that moment, it was something I desperately needed. As I stood there, processing her words, my phone buzzed. Mary's name flashed on the screen, and I sighed. What now? But before I could answer, Patrick's name appeared instead. Muttering under my breath, I glanced at Diane and her husband, who exchanged knowing looks. Pamela, you might want to go back to the restaurant, Diane said, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. You might see something interesting. They left, looking oddly pleased with themselves. I hesitated, but curiosity tugged at me, overpowering my desire to distance myself from the drama. Reluctantly, I turned back toward the restaurant, wondering what twist lay ahead. When I finally answered Patrick's frantic call, his voice was laced with panic. Pamela, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was all a lie. I'll send the divorce papers later, he blurted out, but then quickly added, almost pleading, wait, can't you come back? Please, it's a lifetime request. His almost childish plea might have made me laugh if not for Diane's cryptic hint lingering in my mind. Against my better judgment, I decided to return to the restaurant. When I arrived, I was met with an unexpected scene. A crowd had gathered around Patrick's table where a local TV announcer, Mary's favorite, was speaking into a microphone. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Mary was stumbling over her words, clearly flustered as she tried to explain herself. No, that's not it. It's a misunderstanding, she stammered. Patrick and Amanda sat awkwardly, looking completely unprepared for the spectacle unfolding before them. The announcer, relentless, pressed Mary further. You loudly declared that Pamela is an outsider and should leave. Could you explain what you meant by that, in detail? Meanwhile, Diane's husband, along with others who had been offended earlier, had quietly slipped away from the scene. I stood there, dumbfounded, as I pieced together that this had somehow turned into a public spectacle, and judging by the cameras, it was possibly being broadcasted live. A staff member approached, noticing my confusion. It's been quite a day, hasn't it? They remarked, explaining that a TV recording had been scheduled at the restaurant that day, which explained the unexpected media presence. The entire family drama had accidentally played out on live television, exposing everything to the public in stark, unfiltered detail. I stood there, processing the whirlwind of events, feeling a strange mix of disbelief and vindication. This bizarre turn of events had unfolded in such a way that the truth was now out for everyone to see. The private dining area hadn't been as secluded as they thought, and conversations had been easily overheard. Just as I was about to step outside for air, a famous TV announcer approached Mary, beaming. Mary, would you be willing to do an interview? He asked cheerfully. Mary, always an avid fan of the media, lit up with excitement. An interview. Absolutely, she exclaimed, eager to soak in the attention. The announcer smiled. We're talking about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationships today. We heard there was a bit of a heated argument earlier, and the daughter-in-law left in tears. Can you tell us what happened? Mary's face went pale at the unexpected question. Amanda's expression mirrored her mother's as they both struggled to come up with a response. Their manipulation and scheming had now been laid bare, and they were cornered into explaining the truth. Just then, from across the room, Patrick spotted me. He looked desperate, his eyes pleading. "Pamela, please," he called out. But by now, his words were nothing more than noise against the backdrop of the chaos that had unfolded. "I can't let this shame be known. It was all a misunderstanding," Patrick implored, looking utterly defeated. But by then, any feelings I had for him had evaporated. Mary, attempting to smooth things over, forced a strange smile. "Oh, we usually call each other Pamela," she said, trying to paint a picture of familiarity. "Pamela, come over here," she beckoned, her voice unnervingly sweet. As I approached, the announcer directed the microphone toward me. "You say you call each other Pamela, but how does the daughter-in-law truly view her mother-in-law?" they asked. Calmly, I responded, "I've never been called that." I paused. "I have, however, been called unpatriotic for not having children. Multiple times. Patrick and I haven't felt ready or confident enough to start a family. We haven't even tried in over 2 years, and I've been repeatedly told that's grounds for divorce." I continued, sharing how Patrick had initially supported me when I first felt ill and had to take a leave from work. I appreciated his kindness and followed him here, thinking a change of environment might help. But this, I said, gesturing to the scene around me, is the result. By then, my tears had dried up, leaving only detachment. Seeing Mary and Amanda squirm with embarrassment brought a small flicker of satisfaction. As I stood there, fully aware this could all be broadcast nationwide, I couldn't help but reflect on the surreal nature of the day. Watching Mary's distressed expression when I mentioned the broadcast made me smile. "Well, since I'm considered an outsider, I suppose I should leave. Goodbye," I said, savoring the moment as I turned to exit the restaurant. I ignored the shouts and commotion that followed, feeling a wave of relief as I walked away. The day had been long and fraught with emotion, but in that final moment, I felt a profound release. Walking away from that chaotic scene, a mix of relief and satisfaction settled in. Although Mary and her family managed to prevent the footage from airing, the incident caused a local stir, becoming a hot topic among relatives and acquaintances. The gossip spread quickly, fueling endless speculation. I returned home, packed my belongings, and moved back to my parents' house. I sent Patrick the divorce papers, but his response was delayed, prompting me to consider involving a lawyer. To my surprise, Patrick soon appeared at my parents' doorstep. My father, Peter, usually a composed and calm man, took charge of the situation with a firm hand. Patrick, clearly remorseful, offered a heartfelt apology. He claimed he would sever ties with his family and promised to trust only me going forward. But his words felt hollow, too little, too late. Visibly upset by the years of distress Patrick had caused, my father didn't mince words. "Why didn't you realize this sooner? What have you put Pamela through all these years? Just sign the divorce papers and leave," he instructed sternly. With regret etched across his face, Patrick handed over the papers. His handwriting was shaky, barely legible. Despite the difficulty, the divorce was processed smoothly. It later emerged that Amanda had been the true cause of her infertility, a fact she had wrongly blamed on her husband. Now on the brink of her own divorce, she no longer visited her in-laws. Patrick returned to live with his mother, Mary, in their small hometown, likely facing the weight of uncomfortable rumors. But that chapter of my life was closed. In the months that followed, life took a more positive turn. I reconnected with a classmate from my hometown, and we eventually married. Our relationship is filled with joy, and we soon welcomed a child. We now have a 2-year-old daughter, and I am expecting our second child. My new mother-in-law is a blessing, supportive, kind, and everything Mary was not. Life is unpredictable, but in this moment, I am living a fulfilling and happy life surrounded by the love and support I once thought was out of reach.